And on this Labor Day Sunday Square Off, our job, our labor, is to find hard solutions to end the violence on the streets of Baltimore. Enough is enough. The violence must end. We welcome Interim City Police Commissioner Kevin Davis, who along with his officers is battling every day 24/7 to make our neighborhoods safe. It's good to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Richard.
And we have to find some solutions today. That's what we're doing. All right? We also like to welcome a man who lives and works in Baltimore and reminds us every Wednesday on his WBAL radio talk show that 3-year-old Mackenzie Elliott's killer is still out there somewhere. C4, your debut, your premiere.
Thank you very much. You've got to stop our children from being shot in the streets.
Absolutely. We also welcome Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby, who is determined, as you've seen for a long time now, to do what she can to keep violent repeat offenders locked up and off the streets. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thank you for having me, Richard. Excited to be here.
And we welcome back to Square Off the man in charge at the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center, the University of Maryland Medical Center, Dr. Tom Scalea, who unfortunately has to tell far too many parents that their son or daughter was shot and is now deceased. Square Off, as you know, is a community service of the law offices of Peter Angelos. And if you or a loved one has been hurt because of someone else's negligence, we urge you to pick up the phone. You can do it now. You can do it tomorrow on Labor Day. It doesn't matter. And call 1-800-556-5522. Schedule your free consultation. And I know you'll be glad you did. Well, as a 7-year volunteer at Shock Trauma, I have the pleasure to once in a while run into this distinguished trauma surgeon, Dr. Tom Scalea. And a few weeks ago, I said, how was overnight? You said you had worked on 5 gunshot victims. And then I saw you another day, you had worked on 7. Last night, you worked on more. Your thoughts, again, about this horrible epidemic?
The numbers are crazy. If you think in terms of proportions, we're seeing 40 homicides a month. That tracks to 500 in a year. There were 400 in New York City last year. What is it, 9-10 million people, 600,000. This is out of control.
It is out of control and completely unacceptable. We've got to do more, and we got to go after these individuals, and I think that's what we're attempting to do with the commissioner. At the end of the day, it's a very small number, and I know we've heard this before, but it's a very small number of individuals that define the perception of our city and are responsible for the majority of the crime.
We want new information today, though. We've heard a lot of this stuff.
Right.
Something new. Give us something new, Commissioner.
Well, I think we'll eventually look back at 2015, because one of these days we're going to be beyond 2015, and we're going to be able to say that's when things change. So the 621,000 people that Dr. Scalea referenced who live in Baltimore, we've got about 238 of those folks. That's it, 238.
Bad people?
And the violent repeat offenders that the state's attorney talks about, people who pull triggers, people who kill, people who harm, that's the focus of public safety. It can't be the old way. It's got to be a new way.
Were it not for this man and Shock Trauma and Johns Hopkins and Mercy Hospital, our homicide numbers would be horrific, more horrific than they actually are, Richard. What we've got to do, though, and our commissioner, with all due respect to the police department through many generations, I've heard commissioners talk about officers getting out of the car, knowing the minister in that community, knowing the store owner, knowing the homeowner, separating them from the criminal. We have not done that appropriately. We've got to get officers out of the cars, knowing who the anchors are in those communities.
Well, C4, I'll say this, I absolutely agree. Foot patrol is an art form that law enforcement leaders have not taught this profession. So it's been so many generations since we've done that well. We simply can't just tell our police officers to get out and engage in this. We've got to teach them. So I've spoken to cops who want to be taught how to do it, and that wraps around our community policing focus. We've got to teach them the art form of being a cop.
But that's where trust begins. What happens is once the officer gets to know who's in that community, they learn that they can trust these individuals. Then the individuals know they can trust them. Then, Richard, and everybody at the table, then we start having communities cooperating with the police.
Right.
But people are afraid to cooperate with the police, right?
People are certainly afraid. We are. We have to break down these barriers of distrust, because at the end of the day, we can get these individuals off the street. The police officers get them off the street. My prosecutors get into court, try to convict them. But it's the community. It's the community that comes forward, and even in the face of a murder, are the ones to testify to say, this is the one who did it. This is the individual who's responsible for killing my loved one.
But that's scary to do, isn't it? It's frightening to do.
It's frightening, but people want to know that they're being protected.
Correct.
And that you have their best interest. And so from the law enforcement perspective, that's what we're attempting to do, is to break down these barriers of distrust so that we can get this small number of individuals responsible for the majority of the crime off our streets.
The walls are generational.
Yeah, it's hard. The people they're beaten down. They're exhausted. And I go out and talk to these families, and it's again, you're going to come tell me my other son, my other daughter, it's a completely disheartening experience.
Well, Richard, I'll say this too. When we just can't ask the community to trust public safety, but we have to respect the community first, because the community won't trust the police department or the state's attorney's office until the community knows that we respect them. So the crime fight and the community policing strategies are not mutually exclusive. We can do both very, very well. We don't have to choose one at the expense of the other. So that's the change.
In light of 151 homicides since May the 1st, we're talking about 125 days, 151 homicides, let alone the non-fatal shooting number. We need to reinstate, and with all, Commissioner Batts might have his issues. His Public Enemy #1 program was very good. It galvanized the community. It brought people together to begin to identify somebody. We need to bring that back to identify who are the most violent people.
And let me tell you, it was very highly effective in that we were able to convict Public Enemy #1. That was an individual who was accused of killing two women and critically injuring another one. He's now facing life plus 240 years. Public Enemy #2, life plus 50 years.
But the community got engaged. The community called
that's
the police.
The point.
That's the thing.
We would not have been able to do that without it.
What, Commissioner?
We still have, that hasn't gone away. So
it's not announced, though. We need to know it.
Public Enemy #1 is a person who's wanted for something that this entire city needs to galvanize.
But put that name
around.
out there. Say, I'm telling you, when we hear Public Enemy #1, I'm telling you from a radio standpoint, my callers get engaged when they hear. It's something about that. Public Enemy #1, go get them. It's an engaging thing to use.
I can understand that, because, I mean, at the end of the day, there's more of us than there are of them, and so it would galvanize people to say this is an individual.
And BPD's Most Wanted is something we want to do. So with our new media relations director, we want to get on television.
Most Wanted has been there, with all due respect, Commissioner. Public Enemy #1 did something in the city. I have not seen people make phone calls, get engaged. I'm not saying Most Wanted isn't a good thing, but Public Enemy #1 did something that engaged people.
There's room for both, because I think when we identify that person who is Public Enemy #1, we can't always have a Public Enemy number. We have to have someone that the community wraps their arms around and galvanizes with us in the state's attorney's office and goes and finds.
Just please bring it back.
All right, we'll be back in just a moment.
Right.
Our Square Off special will continue. Enough's enough. The violence must end. We'll be back in just a moment.